Hi, I'm Mary Katherine, and welcome to my table. We're going to make some chicken pot pie today, and we can use a shortcut or two that we'll talk about along the way. Come on, jump in and make it with me. Okay, let's start by making our pie crust to go on top of the chicken pot pie. I'm going to start by showing you how I cut my butter. You need cold butter. And I know there are gadgets out there now that you can get to cut the butter for you, but we want it in little cubes, and it's just so simple and easy to do with a knife. So I'm going to show you how I do it here today. Just do that, flip them apart, and then just kind of slice down the middle again from both directions. And you've got some small little chunks when we put these into our pie crust. All right, so now that we've cut our butter, I'm going to show you how we measure the flour for this recipe. And this is really how you want to measure flour for most recipes. We need 2.5 cups. So we're going to spoon the flour into our 1 cup measuring cup. And then once we spoon it in, you kind of take your knife and just kind of flatten it across the top. There's 1 cup. There's 2. So I'll switch to my 1/2 cup measuring cup. And that will give us our 2.5 cups. And there we go. And then we're going to use about 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt and about a teaspoon of sugar. And then we're going to add our butter, our little cubes of butter. This is 2 sticks of butter. So that makes 1 cup of butter that you add. I'm going to do this in my KitchenAid mixer today, as you can see. You can also do this in a food processor, but if you don't have either one of those, you can certainly do it just with a pastry cutter by hand. It works very well that way as well. So I'm going to do this until our butter is kind of pea size in our flour. So just watch it. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit now to the next level. And let it start incorporating that butter into the flour and break it up a little bit until it's the size we need. I think that looks pretty good. That's going to work for us. So now, our last ingredient to add is cold water. And I have this in ice because you want it extremely cold when you add it. And we want about 7 tablespoons. Well, that actually has an ice cube. I don't want that in there. We're going to add about 7 tablespoons. Okay, let's see how that does. Those may not have been quite full tablespoons. We'll see if we need just a smidge more. And you really just want to let it go now until it brings it all together. And then you're done. You want to turn it off as soon as it all comes together. Okay. I think that water may have been enough. It looks like it's going to come together. Yep. All right, that looks good. Once it's all together, let's get it off my beater here. It likes to stick to it. Okay, there we go. And then you just want to kind of gather it all together in your hands and make sure it's good and wet enough. And this is perfect. Okay, and this is actually enough for 2 pie crusts. So what you want to do at this point is just kind of break it in half. About like this. Make sure they're fairly even. Maybe a smidge more on this one. Okay. And then you want to put it in some plastic and just flatten it into a kind of a round disc. It doesn't have to be perfect. But we're going to put it in the fridge for about an hour. You want to chill it for about an hour before you roll it out. The great thing about this pie crust, too, is if you need to make this crust ahead of time, it keeps in the refrigerator for about 3 days. So if you want to make the crust today because you know you need it, maybe on, Tuesday or Wednesday night this week, whatever, you can do that and then just get it out and roll it out when you need it. It also keeps in the freezer very well. You can keep it in the freezer for about 3 months. So if you want to keep these done ahead of time and just have them handy to use, that is a great time saver down the road. Okay. So there we go. We've just got our discs wrapped up. Of course, if you're going to store them in the freezer, I would wrap them like this and then put them in a more freezer-friendly bag or container to keep them. But this is how we're going to put them in the fridge, just in 2 discs for about 1 hour to chill. All right, now that we've got our pie crust put together, let's get to the filling for our chicken pot pie. What I have here is about maybe 2.5 cups of rotisserie chicken. I buy these at my big warehouse store, and they are super cheap, and they're bigger than the ones you get in the grocery store. And so I get them, and I keep chicken on hand. I pull it all off the bone the day I get it, and I store it in bags in my freezer. And so I have it handy to use whenever I want to. This one actually is fresh that we're going to use today, but it works great out of the freezer too. So I've got about 2.5 cups of chicken, and then I've got some mixed veggies. And these are from my freezer. You could opt to use canned veggies or fresh veggies if you want. But these are frozen vegetables. And that's probably about, 3 to 4 cups of frozen vegetables. And then we're going to take probably about a teaspoon of salt and just sprinkle that around in here. And then you could chop your own onion if you want to. But sometimes I use a time saver. And I use the dry minced onion. And that's what I'm going to do with this recipe today. And I'm going to use probably about 2 tablespoons of the dry minced onion. And it gives a really good flavor to it as well. All right, now we want to bring it together by using a can of just cream of chicken soup. That's just going to go directly into here. And that's not going to be quite enough. I'm going to go ahead and mix it up and kind of see how much I might need extra. If you feel like it, you could just use a whole second can of cream of chicken soup. I don't want mine real soupy, so I'm not going to do that today. But you can use that option if you want to. Okay, that brings it all together, but I do want a little more liquid in it. And so what I do sometimes is just drizzle a little bit of heavy cream. You could also just use milk if that's what you've got on hand, but the cream is going to give it just a little more richness. That's maybe 1/4 of a cup. Let's see if that's enough for what I want today. I think I might use just a little bit more. Maybe a couple more tablespoons. And that looks good for our filling. Now, if you like more liquid in yours, like I said, go ahead and add that second can of soup if you want. I don't like ours quite so soupy, so I'm going to do it this way. I've already got my pan sprayed. This is just enough for like an 8x8 or 9x9 casserole dish. So if you have a large family and you want to do a 9x13 pan, just double it. I'm just going to spread it to our corners. Okay, and so that's our filling for our chicken pot pie. And it will get a little bit juicier as it cooks as well. So keep that in mind as you're adding your soup or a little bit of cream or milk to it. All right, it's time to roll out our pie crust. I'm just going to get a little bit of flour and sprinkle around on the counter. We don't want it to stick, so make sure you have a pretty good layer on the surface. I'm going to get our disc out and put there. And I kind of like to get flour on both sides pretty well, like this. And then I may get a little more flour just to make sure I have that even sprinkling underneath it as well. And then I put a little bit on my rolling pin and then start rolling it out. And because you've chilled this, it is going to be a little bit harder. So just be patient and roll it out, knowing that it will just take a little bit of time to do this. Not too long, though. This is a really delicious pie crust recipe, and chilling it with that butter in it. If you notice, we used only butter. We did not use shortening at all for this pie crust. But it's so delicious just with that all-natural butter. And when I do this for my chicken pot pies, I just like to have it look very rustic on top. I don't try to make it pretty or anything. I just kind of get it in the shape I need for whatever dish I'm using. So kind of a little bit of a square shape here going. And that's about the size we need for this dish. And then I just take it. And see, I had enough flour under there so it didn't stick. That was good. And then I lay it on top. And then I just tuck those rough edges in. See, I didn't even pretty up the edges. I just kind of tuck them in down around the filling. And then we do want to go back in just with a knife and just cut a few slits in it so that that steam has room to escape. And the pie crust will bake a little more evenly that way. Okay, after I completed putting together the chicken pot pie, I put it in the fridge and let it chill for a little while. And there's one basic reason why I do this. The crust, if you let it chill first and then bake it at a very high temperature, it will keep that butter in the crust better, and it will be good and flaky and so delicious. So I have chilled it. I've just taken it out. We're ready to bake it. And I'm going to do one more thing. You don't have to do this. You can just bake it the way it is if you want. But I'm just going to put an egg wash. And so I've just got one egg that I've beaten here. I'm just going to take my little silicone brush and just brush all over the top of the crust, including those little edges. And just get some of this egg wash mixture on it. It's going to make our crust bake up so nice. And so it's just a little added step that you can do if you want to just take it to the next level. It would be delicious even if you didn't do this, but I like to do this and it doesn't take long. So, okay. That's pretty well covered. And so then the last thing I'm going to do is take a salt and pepper mixture. This is just coarse salt and pepper. It's equal parts, and we keep this on hand. So I'm just going to take a little bit of it. I'm just going to sprinkle over the top. Don't need a lot of this. Just a little touch more flavor. It just makes it look pretty too, I think. Okay, that looks good. We're going to pop it in the oven. 400 degrees is what we're going to bake this on. So it's going in now. It's probably going to be ready in about 35 minutes. I'll keep a watch on it and check and let you know exactly how long it took. Our chicken pot pie is ready. Let's take it out. It looks perfect. Now we need to let it set for just a few minutes before we dig into it. You want to let it sit maybe 5 or 10 minutes before you scoop it out and start eating it. So I wanted to talk about just a couple of things while we wait on that. If you'll remember, we only put the crust on the top of this. Now, when we made the crust, it is enough for 2 crusts. So if you wanted to put crust on the bottom and then again on the top, you could absolutely do that with this recipe. We have found that this is plenty of crust just to have it on the top. So what I do is I just make 2 chicken pot pies typically and save one for later. They freeze really well, and then you can pull it out whenever you want it. So that's what I chose to do with it, or I can use the pie crust for something else. So we just used one on top, but if you want it on the bottom, you can do that too. I do it in a casserole dish. You could also do it in a pie plate if you want to. Have it like a round one, especially if you use that bottom crust, and then you could just cut your slices like you would a piece of pie. But anyway, we do ours in a casserole dish with just the top crust, so I wanted to mention that. All right, this stayed in the oven for 35 minutes. And I do want to also mention that I am cooking this in a convection oven. So if you don't have a convection oven and you want to cook it in just a regular oven, you can do that. You'll probably want to turn your temperature up a little bit more. You need to cook it at a little bit higher heat. So I would bump it up to maybe 420, 425 instead of 400. And then it may need just a little extra cooking time, but keep a watch on it and see. And another thing too, if you tend to do this in a pie dish and then you crimp your edges and make them all pretty where they're sticking up high, you will want to watch the edge because it's going to brown first, and you may have to put some foil or kind of a pie cover over it where that edge won't get too brown. But the way that we did it in the casserole dish, where we kind of tucked the extra crust down around the sides, that really doesn't affect us. So I didn't have to do that at all. But if you do it the other way, you may need to do that. All right, it's probably been long enough. Well, let's give it a taste. I'm going to take it over here with our dishes. Can you say how flaky that crust is? It's delicious. I just know it's going to be. All right, let's get a bite. Look at all that steam coming out. Can you see it in the video? Get a little bit of everything in here. I'm going to have to blow it a minute. It's really hot. Okay, here we go. That's delicious. That's just comfort food right there. Really good. I love this crust. This is my favorite crust to use for anything, for pie crust, for this chicken pot pie. It's just a really good, simple recipe, and it's always delicious. This whole chicken pot pie is delicious. I hope your family loves it. Try it for them today. If you like this content, hit the subscribe button. We're always coming out with new recipes, and we'd love for you to join us here at Mary Katherine's Table. Thank you so much for joining me today. And remember, go out and find someone today who needs a little bit of kindness and give them some of yours.